Going to IIT was part of the limited sort of bouquet of options that in those days you would typically consider.
Yeah.
In some ways, the decision was almost made by the time you went into 11th standard.
Yes.
If you chose to do, in my case, engineering drawing instead of biology, then chances are you were already thinking about becoming an engineer and not a doctor.
Sure.
And there weren't too many other things you think of doing if you were reasonably academically inclined. So IIT was already looming large. And then, as you rightly said, I have two elder brothers.
Right.
Both went to IIT.
Right.
So one went to IIT Kanpur.
Yes.
His batch of 78, passed out in 83. The second went to IIT Delhi, batch of 1980, the last batch of 5-year BTechs, and passed out the year I joined. So he passed out just before I joined.
Right.
So we didn't overlap. But the fact that two brothers had been to IIT, understood what the preparation entailed,
Yes.
In their time, I guess it was brilliant tutorials in Agarwal, coaching classes, and took all the inputs they needed in order to crack JEE. More than anything else, I think it's the people that make an institution. And I think it's the students that really symbolize all that IIT stands for. So you need the opportunity and you need to back yourself.
Yeah.
If you have that self-confidence and you're willing to invest time and effort, you can master anything. We tend to often put people on pedestals, especially when you're very young. You tend to think the world of a lot of people, both living and dead. You'll soon discover as you grow older, everyone has flaws.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes risky because it turns out many of your idols who are living have feet of clay.
Yeah.
And I'd say never assume that people are perfect. Life, everything that you do is a journey.
Sure.
There's a quest for perfection and excellence. But it's very unlikely that you or anyone else has ever actually reached that goal of getting to be all the things that you thought were excellent, outstanding, valuable.
Yeah.
You'll meet lots of fascinating personalities, great people even, but never think that anyone is flawless.
Sure.
Everyone has flaws, some greater, some smaller. And never ever think that you cannot achieve what others have done.
Hi folks, in this episode of the IIT Delhi podcast, we have Dr. Mukund Rajan, who is the CEO, Chairperson of ECube Investment Advisors Private Limited. He is an alumni of IIT Delhi of batch of 1989 from chemical engineering. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for hosting us in your office. We would have preferred that this conversation happened in IIT itself. But if you would want to go back with some fond memories from campus that you would want to share with us.
Wow, lots of memories. Certainly one's time in the hostel, one's time in the Student Activities Center. We used to have a program called FOSAC, which is Freak Out at SAC.
Oh, okay.
And then, of course, the Rendezvous Festival.
Of course.
And lots of fun times. But yeah, there's so much that sort of brings memories back from IIT Delhi. Sports, fantastic sporting facilities, swimming pool, badminton court, tennis courts, cricket pitch. So one would love to go back there and relive those times all over again.
Oh, please, you're welcome to. And what amongst these is the one specifically you always would want to go back to? Are you busy right now, or do you find time for these things?
I have to say I don't find a lot of time. Right now I'm also involved in what's actually an amalgamation of different startups within the company I chair.
Sure.
So that takes a lot of time. But I think the thing that most sort of brings back memories and which I'd love to do all over again is just engaging with the crowd there, the young people, the ideas that people are talking about, the future that they're anticipating, the kind of job opportunities they aspire to. I know a whole lot on that front has changed
Sure.
from the time I was at IIT,
Yeah.
when job opportunities were quite limited in many senses. And also risk-taking abilities were also quite scarce.
Right.
I think now you see many more people willing to start with an entrepreneurial bent, even in their first career move, trying to look at doing something on their own. So it would be lovely to go back and meet the people there more than anything else. I think it's the people that make an institution. And I think it's the students that really symbolize all that IIT stands for.
Absolutely. You have treaded a path which speaks for itself. Going from corporate to having your own entity, as you manage a lot of different entities now, and the shift that you speak of from your time to now. What are the key things you think a student now needs to think about that you didn't need to back then?
I think in my time, there were two big decisions, perhaps, that you needed to make when you were passing out from IIT. The first was, do you want to go abroad? A lot of people at that time were getting scholarships and going on to do their masters or doctorates in the United States for the most part, but also some other countries.
Yes.
The second big decision was if you wanted to stay in India, what kind of job would you look for? And typically it fell into two buckets. There was a group that were very interested in working for the government. Government was a big employer then, it still is.
Right.
And a lot of people were interested in giving the UPSC exam and then qualifying for the civil services.
Yes.
Equally, there were a group of people who wanted to work in the corporate sector in India and would either join the corporate sector directly or do an MBA and then join the corporate sector. And then it is really a function of what kind of large corporate, for the most part, you would want to work for.
Yeah.
So would it be, in those days, I remember groups like DCM, Shriram, and the Ambanis, the Tatas, Birlas, were all valued employers.
Yeah.
Today, I think there's huge amount of choice. My sense is people don't even necessarily want to think about continuing in their existing fields, much more willing to move.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that excited about going abroad for the sake of experiencing or getting exposure to life overseas, but more to test themselves. And many more people now willing to take the risks to start their own businesses, to launch startups, or to try something completely different. I mean, in my time, it was very much about staying on the tried and tested track, doing what generations before you had done.
Sure.
Now, you could be an engineer and decide that you want to become a yoga teacher.
Absolutely.
I've seen people from some of my junior batches now having become monks and being advocates of spirituality. I mean, you could do anything literally that your mind sort of pushes you to.
But considering a generational influence, as you mentioned, you went the contrary way, right? So your father, I understand, was a government officer involved in the research and analysis wing, and your brother was a senior of yours, right? And so how did this decision to pursue IIT and then actually go abroad and then come back? Could you please trace your thinking?
Going to IIT was part of the limited sort of bouquet of options that in those days you would typically consider.
Yeah.
In some ways, the decision was almost made by the time you went into 11th standard.
Yes.
If you chose to do, in my case, engineering drawing instead of biology, then chances are you were already thinking about becoming an engineer and not a doctor.
Sure.
And there weren't too many other things you think of doing if you were reasonably academically inclined. So IIT was already looming large. And then, as you rightly said, not just, I have two elder brothers.
Right.
Both went to IIT.
Right.
So one went to IIT Kanpur.
Yes.
His batch of 78, passed out in 83. The second went to IIT Delhi, batch of 1980, the last batch of 5-year BTECs, and passed out the year I joined. So he passed out just before I joined.
Right.
So we didn't overlap. But the fact that two brothers had been to IIT, understood what the preparation entailed,
Yes.
did the, in their time, I guess it was brilliant tutorials in Agarwal, coaching classes, and took all the inputs they needed in order to crack JEE.
Yeah.
So when my time came, I guess it was the easiest choice to just follow in their footsteps and give the JEE examination. What, however, did change in my case, I guess, my eldest brother, I guess, stayed true to engineering. He's the only one in our family who stayed an engineer all his life. He's an R&D even today.
Yes.
The second one did the Indian route of doing an MBA and then went to the US to do a PhD in finance.
Yeah.
In my case, I was very interested in social sciences. And in those days in IIT, you didn't have too much focus on social science. I don't know what the situation is today, but you did perhaps 2 or 3 courses at best over 4 years, is my recollection. Apart from, of course, the standard obligatory course on English and so on in your first term. And I felt I was missing out on something. Add to that, I got the scholarship to go to Oxford.
Yeah.
And that allowed me to study any field of study that I was interested in. And in the late 1980s, the world as we knew it was changing.
Sure.
Gorbachev was doing phenomenal things in the then Soviet Union.
Yes.
The Cold War as we knew it was coming to an end. And I wanted to understand how the world was changing.
Right.
And therefore, for somebody who had an interest in social sciences and had an interest in the world and what was changing in terms of political affairs, global relations, it made a lot of sense for me to go to Oxford and actually read political science.
Yeah.
So I left engineering and went into political science. I did a master's degree in international relations,
Yes.
which I then followed up with a doctoral dissertation and degree in international relations.
Yes.
And in international relations, I ended up focusing on environmental change
Yes.
and the politics of environmental change.
Yes.
And part of that was because of my degree in chemical engineering. I thought if I understand something about the science behind climate change, ozone depletion,
Yeah.
it'll help in understanding the politics of these issues, which it did.
Sure.
So I hope I haven't given up my training as an engineer, but I did switch fields.
You're right. Only to obviously pursue again, and I use the word again, illustrious career.
Yeah, that's you saying
and
it, but-
also wrote books about a corporate stint at Tatas.
Correct.
So, how does one go to study in the US and come back to dedicate years and years to a company which is almost the word I would use is involved in nation building, if I may say so.
Yeah. So I spent 5 years at Oxford, and in the time I was there from 1989 to 1994, a lot had changed in India.
Yeah.
The India that I left was a very protected economy. We were subscribing essentially to a lot of socialist thought, if you will.
Yeah.
We were a scarcity economy.
Yes.
Foreign multinationals are not really allowed to operate in India freely. There were all kinds of licenses and controls on Indian industry. You even had salary caps in the private sector, which today would be unimaginable. So there are a lot of controls. By the time I came back in '94, all that had changed.
Yeah.
Liberalization had taken place, the economy had opened up, multinational companies had come into India, Indian firms are expanding overseas. So there's a lot of opportunity. And I wanted to understand how this world had changed, the world of enterprise.
Yeah.
And if in India you want to work for an Indian corporate house, they don't come any better than the Tatas. As you rightly said, this is a group that has been dedicated to nation building in multiple facets over 150 years. So it wasn't a difficult choice to make to want to work for the group. But then they also have to take you on board.
Yes.
So I wrote into the Tatas. They had actually advertised openings in what is called the Tata Administrative Service, which is the fast-track general management cadre of the group. So I interviewed with the Tatas for a role in the Tata Administrative Service. I was selected. That was probably one of the last years that Ratan Tata chaired the selection committee. And I think, so much of what happens in your life is really about fate.
Yeah.
He remembered me from that interview, and after I finished a year of induction with the Tatas, he asked me to join him in his office.
Right.
And I became his executive assistant, eventually his chief of staff. I worked with him for 12 years on the trot. And in that time also, I got enormous responsibility and exposure.
Yeah.
I served on the boards of all the Tata telecom companies. And eventually, when I left Ratan Tata, it was to actually go and serve as the managing director of one of the listed telecom companies.
Right.
So I think that opportunity to work with a group as large and as diverse as Tata's, again, opened my mind to how much things had changed in India, also the challenges.
Sure.
But one was in a position where you could actually play a fairly constructive role in how those challenges are going to get addressed.
Yes.
And then the kind of responsibilities I got at a very young age, I couldn't ask for anything more.
Yeah. So what sort of advice do you have for people who are sitting in hostels watching this episode? How do they navigate the industry right now? Industry as a whole. The different scenarios out there, different avenues, be it government, be it corporate, or be it academia for that matter.
The first thing I'd say is be clear what it is that you're passionate about and follow your passion. I think one big thing that has changed in India, as I was mentioning earlier, is risk-taking ability. But that risk-taking ability is also possible now, because it doesn't mean a final end to your career or to your prospects.
Sure.
If you take chances.
Sure.
So I'd say that young people today have an enormous opportunity to really follow their passion and try something different, new, whatever they feel excites them.
Sure.
Because I don't think India today punishes you if you're willing to take that risk, and even if you fail and get disappointed in what you're trying to do, but give it a go. Now, it may well be that you want to work in a large corporate, you want to start on the shop floor, you want to work your way up. That's great. It may well be that you want to become a teacher, you want to go back into academia, you want to do a master's, a doctorate, you want to be a research scholar, or you may want to join the government.
Yeah.
You have all the options ahead of you.
Yes.
So choose the one that you think, is something that your passion is going to take you towards, and that you could do for the rest of your life. Because if you get it right, then the rest of your life is going to be really fun. If you get it wrong, you're going to be making switches, you're going to be pivoting from one point to another point, trying and testing different things, doing a lot of experiments. You learn a lot, but a lot of it will also be painful. A lot of it will also mean time. And time is the one commodity you can't create. If it's gone, it's gone. So follow your passion. And I'd say that it is possible now to take risks.
Sure.
So try what you think is something you'd like to do for the rest of your life, and try and figure out the way to achieve that objective. And don't be scared. I think nobody is going to penalize you for spending even a few years right at the start. It will be difficult if you wanted to do it in mid-career, so do it right at the start. Same thing I'd say for further studies. A lot of people ask me, I did my BTech, then I did a master's, then I did my doctorate. If I had broken that journey in the middle, I suspect that it would have taken me a lot longer to finish all that I did. So getting it out of the way made a lot of sense. It still didn't stop me from then trying my hand in the corporate sector. So after my doctorate, I came back into the corporate world, spent time there. I could have gone back into academia after my stint in the corporate world if I found that I didn't enjoy it. So I gave myself those options, and I think it is possible to do that today. So give yourself a chance, but back yourself to do what really excites you and what you think is going to be something you'd enjoy for the rest of your life.
So what you speak of obviously has a compounding effect to itself, right?
Correct.
So if you choose something which you are sure of, or you want to pursue, then it's a different path. But what is Dr. Mukund Rajan's advice to what to avoid? Because at the onset of the career, there are obviously, as you mentioned, multiple choices. So what is the one filter that people need to put so that they don't tread a rather riskier path or something? They make sure that they are stuck to the right one.
That's a tough one. I'm really not sure I have an answer to what the filter should be. I think most people have a gut feel and instinct about what they don't like. What they may not know is what they could like, which they've not been exposed enough to. I mean, except for your summer project perhaps in third year or fourth year, you may not have had much exposure to the corporate sector.
Yeah.
Now, how would you know whether you'd enjoy a career in a corporate, climbing the corporate ladder?
Yeah.
You won't get to know until you actually try it. So there will be those kinds of potential constraints.
Yeah.
But you get a sense, often even by seeing other people, reading about their careers, looking at role models, seeing who inspires you, seeing what kind of work and activity seems to get you really charged up.
Yeah.
And that will give you some sense of what it is you might enjoy.
Sure.
I mean, in my case, I knew, for instance, that I was never going to be an engineer in a plant, tinkering around with things, doing research and development in a lab, wearing a lab coat and figuring stuff out. I did that in IIT. You had to do that to get your degree.
Yes.
But it wasn't what, in a sense, turned you on. What turned me on was reading about political change, reading about new trends. What also turned me on was, some of the great risks and chances people are taking in the corporate world, the way India was changing. So I knew that I'd like to do some combination of public policy, global affairs, corporate sector work. And I managed to land a lot of that initially with the Tatas and now with what I'm doing on my own.
So have your idols changed from when you began from IIT and to now? Who are your idols right now?
Well, I can tell you one thing. We tend to often put people on pedestals, especially when you're very young. You tend to think the world of a lot of people, both living and dead. You'll soon discover, as you grow older, everyone has flaws.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes risky because it turns out many of your idols who are living have feet of clay.
Yeah.
And I'd say never assume that people are perfect. Life, everything that you do is a journey.
Sure.
There's a quest for perfection and excellence. But it's very unlikely that you or anyone else has ever actually reached that goal of getting to be all the things that you thought were excellent, outstanding, valuable.
Yeah.
You'll meet lots of fascinating personalities, great people even, but never think that anyone is flawless.
Sure.
Everyone has flaws, some greater, some smaller. And never ever think that you cannot achieve what others have done. I think with the right combination of hard work, effort, some luck, inevitably, anyone can achieve the great things that have been done in human history. In the corporate sector, there have been so many speeches I've given where I've told my colleagues that any one of them could have done potentially a better job than somebody like me, for instance, in many of the roles I played. I was, of course, blessed and very fortunate to be given a lot of roles, trying different things and a lot of responsibility. But anybody else could also have done, I would imagine, as good, sometimes a superior job. So you need the opportunity and you need to back yourself.
Yeah.
If you have that self-confidence and you're willing to invest time and effort, you can master anything.
Sure.
I mean, if I told somebody that an engineer could become a doctorate in political science, I mean, most people would say it's not worth the effort and probably is difficult to do. But, it worked out. A lot of people would say, joining a corporate house and without an MBA, being able to rise up the ranks and do something meaningful in leadership levels would be difficult, if not impossible. But I was able to do that. And I don't think it was any enormous amount of great capability. I worked hard, obviously, I think, but I think a lot of people in my shoes would have achieved much more, much better.
Sure.
So back yourself. Never put people on a pedestal and think that those goals, those capabilities are impossible to achieve. Any one of us can do that. And as a CEO in Tatas, I would tell people that each one of you is actually already a CEO. You're in charge of somebody else's fortune, somebody else's life. You may be a father, a mother, a brother, counseling somebody else, counseling a friend.
Yeah.
In a sense, you are a chief executive with a functional responsibility for somebody else's prospects. And you can do a damn good job of that, or you can be a utter failure in that. But each one of us has some enormous responsibilities we carry. And what does a CEO do? A CEO has responsibility for other people. Bottom line, that's what it is. Every one of us can and should think that we can be the best possible CEO there is.
So what sort of vision do you hold for your alma mater, IIT Delhi, to nurture such values in the students that are there? What are those thoughts like?
I think a lot of that is already happening in the sense that much more exposure, I imagine, to the social sciences.
Sure.
You need people with a very open and I would say liberal outlook, a willingness to embrace new ideas, willingness to try new hypotheses. I'd like to see a lot of that cascade into, therefore, a lot more innovation and creativity. A lot of it comes from, left brain, right brain kind of equivalent. So you need much more focus in the IT, which is happening, I think, on social sciences and the focus on the humanities. And I think more exposure to the kind of society we live in. So in my time, we used to have the NCC and the NSS.
Yeah.
And we didn't take those projects seriously, I'm afraid. Most of us. Yeah. We do it to sort of just finish the compliance requirement.
Yeah.
But it actually opens your eyes to the real situation in society for many people who are far less fortunate than you.
Sure.
So I think a lot of focus on that would also help to open many people's eyes to the privilege you have of being part of such an eminent institution and to give back more to society when your time comes and you have the resources to do something with it. And in our time, there's a lot of focus in the classroom. Sometimes your focus on sports and extracurricular activities, dramatics, debating, quizzing, would come at the expense of academics. It's a hard place, but I'd suggest that maybe, I don't know how it is now, but I suspect a little shift in the balance would be nice. I'm sure many students would welcome it.
Absolutely.
But it'll be helpful, I think, for your future also, because it'll give you more time to ponder, to think, to debate. I remember the hostel cup sessions you used to have over a cup of tea in the afternoon. That's how you create people of caliber, of character, when they get a chance to talk about ideas, to talk about the future they want to build, not just sitting in the classroom all the time.
Sure. What sort of role do you see alumni play, such as yourself and, as you mentioned, other people who inspire the current generations, in going about what you envision? Do you have any thoughts for that?
One, I'd love to see alumni engaging much more with the current crop of IIT products.
Sure.
A lot of that also, I think, should entail interactions with the faculty. We used to have our views about the faculty. I don't know how those views have evolved over time, but I know there are some very good teachers in the IITs, and I know that they would also welcome and benefit from conversations with alumni, not just in India, but all across the world. Many alumni are in very strategic positions to understand, what's changing in the world of industry, what kind of technologies are now being developed and becoming very important currency, in fact.
Sure.
Intellectual property creation, all of that. So one would certainly want to see the alumni engaging much more faculty and students and giving the benefit of their own experience. And of course, on the funding side, I think there's enormous good that can be done by alumni. I think many of our alumni who've been to US universities have actually experienced this personally, because many of the scholarships that my batchmates went on, for instance, guess what? They came out of endowments, which those universities were able to then translate into scholarships for deserving students, including students from India. There's no reason why our alumni cannot help to build a lot of that for the future, so that many more students, can make careers for themselves in this country without having to go overseas to invest in the facilities in the IITs, including, by the way, the facilities in the hostels or the facilities in the mess.
Sure.
places that we would spend a lot of time on, even outside the classroom. And of course, the classrooms and the labs, the facilities, all those also need constant investment.
Yeah.
The government does its bit, but I think the private sector and people like us and the alumni network should also play a role.
So that would be about the institute and the general infrastructure to the benefit of students. As people like you and other people who have treaded these paths and are at the forefront of their industries, academia, and different innovation sections, and even environmental conservation, and a lot of mishmash of all this, right? What is the sort of value that a student should imbibe to learn and even know that these things exist? How do they go about navigating the fog of war, if I may say so?
You're asking in terms of job opportunities?
Job opportunities or career opportunities, rather.
See, one, it'll come out of that direct exposure. And that means opening up more time. I talked about the summer projects, for instance, people do.
Sure.
Giving them more exposure to multiple possibilities.
Sure.
Same thing applied to the equivalent of the NCC or the NSS requirement. Allow people time to go out through curated mechanisms,
Sure.
which the institute can run, but give them the opportunity to be exposed to what's happening in society, what's happening in the area of social work,
Yeah.
what's happening in different disciplines, different functions.
Sure.
The more knowledge young people will have, and of course now you have a huge volume of information available
Yeah.
through the internet and so on. I think people will be able to make their own decisions in terms of what looks interesting.
Fair enough.
Having done that, then you have to take the risk
Yeah.
of testing the waters, feeling your way through, seeing if something suits you or does not. And that will take time, that will take effort. But like I said, don't be afraid of the risk.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of disappointment.
Sure.
And you can afford early on in your career to even lose a few years trying to discover what suits you the best.
Sure.
But be willing to sort of make that investment in yourself. And most importantly, as I said, back yourself. Everyone makes mistakes, everyone has flaws. So don't be worried about the first misstep or stumble, but be willing to give it a go and then see if it works out.
Sure.
Nobody will be able to tell you how you can test the waters across 100 different possible avenues,
Yes.
which people before you may have taken. You will have to make that call. But do it through wide discussion and trying to get exposure to at least a few of the possibilities that you think suit you.
Yeah.
And then it's learning by doing.
Yeah.
Most of the things I've done in my life, I've learned by doing. When I went to Oxford, they gave us a reading list for the first subject I studied there, which was international politics between the two world wars. They gave you a reading list which had 1,400 books on it. And a term in Oxford is 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And I almost lost it there. I thought, I can't read 1,400 books in 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I've probably not read 1,400 books in my entire life.
Yeah. Sure.
Forget about 8 weeks. And you panicked, right? But then you talk to others and then you discover that nobody reads 1,400 books.
Sure.
Everyone reads a max of maybe 14 books. But you read 14 books that are in spaces that are of interest to you. You figure out, do I want to specialize in Germany between the two world wars and the history of Hitler and Nazi Germany? Or do I want to look at Japan and East Asia? Or do I want to look at the United States and the Great Depression? You pick a few themes and focus on those.
Yeah.
And read 3 or 4 of the classics, 1 or 2 other optional books, and you're done.
Yes.
And you can write an exam on the basis of that knowledge. So you figure it out. Point is, be willing to, put your feet in the water, get wet, have a few stumbles, but you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And you're not doing this for the first time. Countless people have done the same thing before you. But back yourself. Don't be nervous. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
And I think some amount of good judgment will come by talking to others, I mean, I discovered this. I spoke to other people in Oxford. I asked them,
Yeah.
did you read so many books?
Yes.
How did you navigate this? And they all tell you. They let you in on the secrets
Yeah.
and the ways in which you figure it out. So don't become excessively apprehensive over the future. And there's just a world of opportunity that lies ahead. But yeah, you'll have to be careful and you'll have to use some judgment. But it comes through talking to more and more people, which is where again the alumni network can help.
Yeah.
You can talk to people who've been there, done that before, or done something similar.
Sure.
Talk to them and get their advice. Don't be shy about reaching out.
Yeah. How can people reach out to you then?
My email ID is mukundgovindrajan@gmail.com. It's very easy to remember. It's my full name. Feel free to write. I have a website and yeah, happy to engage.
This is really humbling and inspirational, sir. Thank you for the time. I really wish we had more, but I understand you have other engagements.
Thank you very much and
There is
good luck.
just a small section that we do at the end where we have a small rapid fire.
Oh geez,
Just
those
to
are always
understand.
very embarrassing. Sometimes you say some very silly things. But
No,
anyway,
just like that. Just understanding your preferences and your likes
Okay.
Between first year and fourth year of IIT Delhi.
fourth year.
IIT Delhi or Oxford?
Tough one. They both taught me very different things. IIT, I think, because of the bonding and the culture. Oxford, because it opened my eyes to a completely new way of studying. They have something called the tutorial system. Very different from the way I was taught at IIT.
Sure.
But given that I did engineering in one place and humanities in the other, it's to be expected.
The library or the Venti?
No, the 20, obviously.
Rendezvous or convocation?
Rendezvous.
And what about the current life or the student life?
This is again a tough one. The student life prepared me for a lot of what I went through later.
Yeah.
The current life, I hope I'm now in a position where I'm having more impact on many more people's lives. At IIT, I was involved in student politics. I was SAC, GSEC, for
Yes.
instance.
It mentioned that you were also, you served as a Jan Sec.
Yeah, I was General Secretary of Student Affairs Council, yeah. And I was the badminton captain. That's what got me the Rhodes, by the way. So one presumably had some impact,
Sure.
but on a much smaller scale. I think today you have the opportunity to create much greater impact and to that extent, much greater satisfaction.
Thank you for the time, sir.
Thank you so
It's been
much.
a lovely
and,
conversation.
Good luck to everyone who's watching. And as I said, doors are always open for students from IIT Delhi.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.